The letter arrived on a quiet Monday morning. The sky was grey, and a soft rain tapped against the windows of a small house at the end of Oak Street. Inside, 72-year-old Thomas Reed sat alone at his kitchen table. A cup of tea rested beside him. The house was silent except for the ticking of an old clock hanging on the wall. Thomas lived alone. His wife had passed away 8 years earlier. His son lived in another state and rarely visited. Most days were the same. He woke up early, watered the flowers in the garden, read the newspaper, and spent the evening watching old movies. Life had become peaceful, but it was also lonely. That morning, he heard the familiar sound of the mailbox closing. He slowly stood up, put on his coat, and walked outside. Usually, the mailbox held bills or advertisements. Nothing important ever arrived anymore, but today was different. Among the envelopes was one small cream-colored letter. There was no stamp he recognized, no company logo, no return address, only his name written in careful handwriting. Thomas Reed. He stared at it for several seconds. Something about the handwriting felt familiar, very familiar. His hands trembled slightly as he carried the letter inside. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at it again. The paper looked old, very old. The corners were slightly yellow. The envelope seemed as if it had traveled a very long way. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a single folded page. As soon as he saw the first line, his heart nearly stopped. Dear Thomas, if you are reading this, then somehow my letter has finally found you. The letter was signed by Michael Carter. Thomas stared at the name. Michael Carter, his best friend, his closest friend, the friend he had not seen in more than 20 years, the friend he believed had forgotten him forever. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. He was 17 again. He could see two young boys riding bicycles through summer fields. He could hear laughter. He could see baseball games, fishing trips, and long conversations under the stars. Thomas and Michael had been inseparable. Everyone believed they would remain friends for life, but life does not always follow plans. After high school, Thomas stayed in their hometown. Michael left for another city to attend university. At first, they wrote letters every week, then every month, then only a few times a year. Life became busy. Jobs, marriage, children, responsibilities. Slowly, the letters stopped. One day, they simply lost contact. Thomas had often wondered what happened. He had searched for Michael years ago, but never found him. Now, after all these years, a letter had appeared. He continued reading. Thomas, I do not know where to begin. Perhaps with an apology, perhaps with the truth. 22 years ago, I wrote several letters to you. I never received a reply. At first, I thought you were busy. Later, I thought you were angry. Eventually, I convinced myself that our friendship had ended, but I never stopped thinking about you. Thomas frowned. He whispered softly, I never got your letters. He continued reading. Years later, I discovered something strange. An old neighbor told me that many letters sent through our local post office had been misplaced during a storage accident. Some were never delivered. At first, I laughed. Then I wondered, what if your letters never reached me? What if mine never reached you? What if 20 years of silence began because of a simple mistake? Thomas felt a lump in his throat. A simple mistake. Could it really be that simple? Could two friends lose each other because of lost mail? He looked out the window. Rain continued falling softly. The world outside seemed distant now. His entire attention remained fixed on the letter. I often imagined meeting you again. I imagined us sitting together, laughing about old times. I imagined introducing you to my grandchildren. I imagined telling you how much your friendship meant to me. But life moves quickly, faster than we expect. A tear rolled down Thomas's cheek before he even realized it. He wiped it away. Then he read the final section. Thomas, I am writing this from a hospital room. The doctors have been honest with me. My time is limited. There are many things I regret, but losing my best friend is one of the greatest. If this letter reaches you, please know that I never forgot you. Not for a single year. Your friend always, Michael. Thomas lowered the page. The room felt silent. Too silent. For a long time, he simply sat there. Then he noticed something written at the bottom. A hospital address and a date. The letter had been written only 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. Michael was still alive. Thomas stood up so quickly that his chair nearly fell over. For the first time in years, he felt something powerful. Purpose, hope, urgency. He rushed upstairs and packed a small bag. The hospital was over 600 miles away. The journey would take nearly an entire day. None of that mattered. Only one thought filled his mind. I have to see him. I have to see my friend. The next morning, before sunrise, Thomas began the journey. As miles passed beneath the wheels of his car, memories returned one after another. He remembered Michael teaching him how to fish. He remembered getting lost in the woods together. He remembered laughing until they could barely breathe. For years, he had buried those memories beneath everyday life. Now they felt alive again, as if no time had passed at all. Late the following evening, Thomas arrived at the hospital. His heart pounded as he walked through the halls. A nurse checked the room number. Then she smiled gently. He's awake, she said. Thomas stood outside the door. For a moment, fear stopped him. What if Michael didn't recognize him? What if 20 years had changed everything? Then he opened the door. An older man lay in bed near the window. His hair was white. His face carried the marks of age. But his eyes were exactly the same. Michael looked up. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Michael smiled. A slow, surprised smile. Thomas felt tears fill his eyes. Hello, Michael. Neither man cared about pride. Neither man cared about appearing strong. They embraced like brothers who had finally found each other again. For the next several hours, they talked and talked and talked. They shared stories, photos, memories, regrets. They laughed until nurses asked them to keep their voices down. At one point, Michael shook his head. 20 years, he said. 20 years because of lost letters. Thomas smiled sadly. At least one finally arrived. Michael nodded. Yes, at sunset, orange light filled the room. The two friends sat quietly, watching the sky, just as they had done when they were teenagers. Finally, Michael spoke. You know something? What? I spent years thinking I had lost my best friend. Thomas smiled. And I spent years thinking the same thing. Michael laughed softly. What a waste of time. Thomas nodded. But we're here now. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Michael reached into a drawer beside the bed. He removed a small box. I wanted you to have this. Inside were dozens of photographs, pictures from their youth, fishing trips, school events, summer adventures, a lifetime of memories. Thomas carefully held the box. It felt priceless because it was. Over the next week, Thomas visited every day. The two friends made up for decades of silence. They spoke about everything. Nothing was left unsaid. And when the time finally came to say goodbye, there was sadness, but there was also peace, because neither man carried questions anymore. Neither wondered what happened. Neither felt forgotten. Their friendship had survived time, distance, and silence. Months later, Thomas returned home. The old house felt different now. Less empty, less lonely. Every evening, he looked through the photographs, and every evening he smiled, because one lost letter had separated two friends, but one delivered letter had brought them back together. Years later, visitors would often see an old framed envelope hanging on Thomas's wall. When they asked about it, he always smiled. Then he would tell them a story about friendship, a story about second chances, and a story about a letter that arrived 20 years late.